hello. Thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you very much for coming. I hope I can remember what we talked about. Let's try it. No Accident is the 25th in the Posadas County Mystery Series.
Yep.
One of my all-time favorites, which I have read in real time over the years that Stephen has written it, and it was my pleasure to edit a lot of the books, so it's been a lot of fun. And we were talking about, before we discovered we had to reboot this, we were talking about the fact that there's an ensemble cast that goes with the Sheriff's Department, and the people, actually, it's the whole community in Posadas County, not just the Sheriff's Department. It's the people who run the diner, it's the people who, and you bring in people sometimes for jobs in Posadas County, but most of the time they turn out to be either bad guys or victims. I mean, they don't always survive, some of the newcomers.
Right.
Right. So we were talking about what's the difference between being a sheriff and an undersheriff, and that transition between Bill Gassner and Estelle Guzman Reyes happened in Bag Limit. So want to remind us how all that happened?
Yeah, he basically decides to retire in Bag Limit. I mean, he's 65, or no, actually he's 70, I guess. And he decides to retire. And it just happens that a good friend of his is the local livestock inspector and has cancer, and tells Bill, you need to take over as livestock inspector. Okay, and so he does, and hates it. They want him to, wear a gun as a livestock inspector. That job has changed over the years.
Has it?
Oh, my goodness, yes. At least in New Mexico. And then they want him to go qualify, and they want him to do all this other stuff. And he said, no, I'm not going to do all that junk. And so he quits as livestock inspector, and then he's fully retired.
Except he's not ever really retired.
No, I mean, he helps Estelle, who's a really smart person.
Was she in Hardshot? I'm trying to remember. She was always there, but sort of low on the totem pole at the Sheriff's Department?
Well, she was a road deputy, and when that car takes its flight over into the Arroyo, she was the one who climbs down the hill and sees that there are 5 teenagers packed up in the car, and starts looking and finds a bunch of cocaine under the seat and said, oops. And so that's really the first time that Gassner gets to work with her. And then at the end of that book, when Gassner has his heart attack, another one.
Another one.
Oh, my goodness, yeah. In the second book, he has to recuperate.
After Hardshot, which is the first book.
Yeah, in Bitter Recoil, he has to recuperate, and so he decides to go visit Estelle, who's taking a job with a sheriff's department up in the Jemez Mountains. It would be Sandoval County in real life, it's made up. And of course, he gets involved in some nonsense up there in that. And she is obviously continuing to be really competent, and he learns that she's pregnant. So in the third book, when she comes back to Posada, she's carrying the newborn Francisco in a backpack and helps him investigate there. And she's just always around and moving, and becomes undersheriff by the time Scavengers comes along, which is book 10.
So we were discussing the role of sheriff versus undersheriff.
Yeah.
And the undersheriff can, depending on where it is, have different functions, sometimes administrative, sometimes other.
Yeah.
But when Bill finally, and the sheriff is an elected office, which we also mentioned, Martin Holman, who was a used car salesman, came in to be sheriff, but then dies. And so when Bill retires, Bobby Torres is becomes the sheriff. Why doesn't Estelle move up to be the sheriff? Is there some obstacle there?
Well, remember, I forgot what title it is. I really did write all these, but I forgot which one it is. She runs for sheriff.
Okay.
And is defeated. Yeah, and that's kind of a bitter pill to take, but she's fairly content being undersheriff because that's the boss of the investigations units.
Right.
She does very little administrative work.
Well, she's not super political, which you have to be sheriff. And you're right, she really likes the detection, the investigation part. In fact, no accident, one of the really interesting features of this book is that Estelle is in California. And so she doesn't have any official, standing. And so she has to investigate. We'll get to that in a minute. It's her younger son that has been injured and so forth. She has to investigate without any standing or any cooperation from the police. This is in the Bay Area, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. So, California is very different than New Mexico
Yeah.
in lots of ways. But, every state has different laws and different ways of law enforcement. So I like seeing Estelle kind of, working outside her milieu, but she has a personal stake. Let's go back to Francisco. So there he is, a baby in a backpack, and now he's a world famous pianist. So you've moved everybody along into different roles.
Yeah, and that there's in books about writing, there's an old rule that says make life hard on the hero or the heroine. It can't be an easy ride. And along about the time I started to do Convenient Disposal, which a friend of mine calls my school book because it involves schools and stuff, I was really thinking, what can I do that's hard on Estelle? Mm-hmm. You can only shoot her so many times, or have her car wrecked. And it occurred to me, what would it be like to a young family if they suddenly discovered that their child is a true music prodigy? I don't just mean gifted, I mean like Mozart too. So, whoa, I mean, the father who's a surgeon, doctor, and Estelle's undersheriff, do they give up their jobs for the kid? How would they handle that? That's fairly rough.
Especially in a rural community. It'd be different if they were in Brooklyn or somewhere, but it's this is not the case.
But she finds out about that because she's at school for a really nasty weapons case that, in fact, was my last parent conference as a teacher. I was the hearing officer for that student.
Really?
Who was carrying a 16-inch, a 6-inch hat pin in the inseams of her jeans.
And didn't stab herself?
Oh no, it was just stitched through her so she could pull it out quickly, and she was planning to stick somebody else. Fortunately, she was discovered. Well, anyway, Estelle is at the school talking with this whole group. And she finishes that job, and the principal of the middle school calls over and says, if you have a minute, would you stop by the little kid's school? She says, oh no, because she knows her son is over there. Mm-hmm. So she goes over, and the teacher says, do you know what your son, who's in kindergarten, does during lunch hour? He sneaks out of the cafeteria and goes down to the music room, and there he is standing in front of the piano picking out notes. Wow. And Estelle's aunt, who's her husband's aunt, gives her a hard time about this, tells her, how could you not know that your son is full of music? And that's a tough punch to take, I think, for a parent. I don't know. You don't even have a piano. I know we don't have a piano. Obviously, we need to get one. And that's what starts Francisco on that path of being a musical prodigy.
Right. Well, of course, it also leads him to having to go away for better training and, you know, live differently and the whole bit. You know who I miss is Estelle's mother. I was really crazy about Estelle's mother, and she was like a centenarian, I think, by the time she died.
Yeah.
But she was wonderful, and at some point, I guess you had to make a decision about whether she could carry on.
Yeah, because there's the fundamental difference between that type of series and like. Example I always use is the Hardy Boys, where, you know, Frank and Joe are always 17 and 18 years old. They never age.
Right.
If you make the decision, whenever you make it, to have it a real-time series where the characters keep aging, eventually there's going to get to be a point where you have to do something with the character that just gets too old. And so she has a peaceful off-stage passing on.
Well, she had a very long life.
Yeah, she's close to 100, and it's been a tough life. You know, a little tiny northern Mexico town where she was a school teacher.
And that's another thing I like about the series, which is harder to manage right now, with all the border stuff going on. But the back and forth between the New Mexico town and the little town in Mexico, I really like that. And you've had some interesting jurisdictional cross questions over time in this series, which I made that easy on myself by creating the character of first Captain and then Colonel Naranjo. From the Mexican police side.
Who's from the Mexican jurisdiction, and he's a really smart, savvy guy.
Yep.
He also is deeply in love with Estelle, but that's okay. But he understands jurisdictional nonsense. And in that one scene, I forget which book it is now, where Tommy Pasquale drives one of the electric company's Kodiak trucks right through the border fence to catch the bad guys. You know, Colonel Naranjo just looks at the fence and says, "Oh, those cows, they sure make a mess of that wire, you know."
I really like him too. Of course, he can't be in every book because not everyone has that. And in fact, as I've said, this one gets Estelle over to California. I'm sort of trawling through the past because it's so much fun to talk about it. Let's. Francisco is the older boy and the prodigy, but Carlos, the younger boy, it would be really hard for him if he didn't have something of his own. I mean, to live in the shadow of a brilliant brother as a younger brother would be pretty searing. So what is Carlos's deal?
He's an acoustical engineer. That's what he does, and he's really good at it. In fact, he designed the auditorium and the sound system up in Night Zone. And his girlfriend, Tasha Carsey, is a graphic artist who does just wonderful things. And so they have a great career going.
A different career.
A very different. And he has absolutely no jealousy about his brother's success.
Good.
And his brother is extremely close to the family and is, he's a concert pianist now at age 26 or 7. He's making a potload of money, and he's got all kinds of new projects, and his wife is a concert cellist. So they're doing very well, and he's discovered there's no point in breaking your neck trying to get from one place to another. Why not just rent a jet?
Yes, which comes in really handy in this book.
Yeah.
I suffered from jet envy when I read this book. I always said if I won the lottery, the one thing I would do differently, I would never fly commercial again if I could avoid it.
But it's just common sense. His brother's been hurt in California, and his mother in New Mexico needs to know. And he just says, "I'm in New York. We're leaving Kennedy in an hour in the Lear, or whatever it is, Gulfstream. And we'll stop in Posadas and pick you up."
Right.
And go on to California and take care of Carlos. It's that simple. And she starts to backpedal, and he just tells her, "No, Mom, just do it."
Yeah, well.
To her, $5,000 is a fair amount of money, although they do well because of the husband's surgery.
Stephen, honey, it's $5,000 an hour.
Yeah, but
Right.
it's only 4 hours, so you know.
So that's $20,000.
Yeah, that's
Plus, I mean, that's a lot more. I briefly thought that you could do this for $5,000 until I read the finer print and discovered it's like $5,500 an hour.
Yep. But
So,
you know, if you're a millionaire, that's
yeah, well, I understand.
Yep.
You could do that, which is extremely handy.
Yeah.
So, one other character, which is Estelle's husband. I mean, he's a really neat guy, and he runs he's the chief surgeon in the hospital in La Posada.
Yeah, he is a surgeon. Not really heavy surgery, because if you remember several books ago, way back, he had a bike accident when he was up in Ann Arbor and wrecked his hand, and so he thought for quite a while he wasn't going to be able to do surgery. He still doesn't do, heart surgery.
Right.
But how many doctors are there in Posadas? Not very many. And he's got an expanded clinic that also serves part of northern Mexico. So he's very busy. But I never wanted him to be a character who comes in and helps Estelle solve a crime.
Well, and not only that, you want him to be busy in his own life so he doesn't resent the fact that she is often consumed by cases and investigations. And, that's a real problem for cops. The partners of cops frequently don't do well because, it's such a demanding, and there's no like regular hours, if something terrible happens. So the fact that he's a doctor and has the same issues, they have to learn to accommodate each other.
Exactly.
Which works out extremely well. Yep. And actually, her mother was useful when the babies were small.
Yes.
For that reason, so for a person who didn't actually intend to write a series, you designed this pretty well.
Yeah. I wish I could say that I planned it all from the very first book.
Yeah, but don't you think it's grown organically? I mean, that's the sense I have of it, is that one thing has always led to another.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember our conversations back, when Bill was going to retire and Estelle was coming forward. You gave that a lot of thought. One of the things I've always liked about Bill is he's an insomniac.
Yeah.
So, he's out in his car driving around drinking coffee at 3 a.m. And no wonder he's had a heart attack, because he spends all his time in the sun, eating food that's bad for him.
But he likes
what is it, San Juan de Nate Diner?
Oh yeah, Don Juan.
Don Juan, right? And that can't be good for him.
Of course not. But I keep being asked.
And he has this. He's living in a very large old house where there's room for other people.
Yeah, which he gave to his godson,
right,
Francisco, with a like amount of money to Carlos. So
right.
He's a nice godfather to have. But that sounded like rain, but I guess
no, it's just the air conditioning going on. Sorry about that. Right. So let's talk about No Accident. Having done all of that, what has happened to Carlos? He and Tasha are off in California, and they're out riding a tandem bike, a new bike that they have bought. And what happens?
They're out riding on a smooth paved park road with a bike lane. And a guy comes up behind them unannounced and doesn't just clip them, he hits them. Pow! And they crash to the ground, and then he stops and backs up over him. And Carlos takes the brunt of it with all kinds of sort of awful injuries. And so Estelle is right in the middle of an investigation that started from a bar fight. A character who's playing a part in the book I'm working on now, a young rancher cowboy, inadvertently, I think, kills a guy in the bar just without thinking. After being cut in the forehead with a knife, he throws a cue ball.
Right, and hits him. Pops
the guy in the temple, and it kills him. So he's facing a grand jury hearing. But right in the middle of that, she gets the news about this crash. And that's, my point in doing that was cops have to live with that. They don't get the luxury of doing one job until it's done.
Right.
They might have 15 different things going on. And so she wants to go, but she's hesitant to drop it. And she's got good people working for her. And primarily Jackie Tabor, who's
She's
captain.
another great character.
Yeah, she is. She's the new sheriff.
Yeah.
In the new book. And she
good,
just
because
tells
Bobby Torres is retiring.
Bobby's retired. He wants to hunt full time. He's tired of it. And that happens to cops too. They just get to a point where enough is enough. You know, I have a nephew who's an undercover narcotics officer in a major eastern city, and he counts the minutes until he decides to retire. That's just it.
So you're going to have a female-led sheriff and undersheriff department in Posadas County, which, you know, to some degree is still a patriarchal community. So that's going to be fun.
Yeah.
But we're not there yet.
And a female county manager.
Okay, so anyway, Francisco finds out about Carlos too and comes down the Gulf Stream, flies down, picks up his parents, and off they fly to Carlos's bedside. You know, it's a tribute to modern medicine that Carlos is even going to survive, let alone be able to function.
Yeah.
So this is where your interest in the medical side really comes in this book, because there's a lot to do with Carlos's injuries and treatment. Yeah,
but you have to be sort of careful that you don't do too much. You know, that is enough to build tension and enough to say, what now, what's going to happen, to make it, you know, not obvious that Carlos is going to survive, but not enough to drag the story to a stop.
No, but you also need to keep Estelle there long enough to do this investigation, so if he makes an instant recovery, she wouldn't really be able to do that. So while he's touch and go and all the rest of it, she questions, but it's clear that it was a deliberate thing. Once the guy backs up and backs over Carlos, it wasn't just an accident. So she can't stand it, and one way she deals with Carlos's situation is to start to investigate what might have really happened.
Unfortunately for her, there's also fortunately,
right.
The captain who's in charge of that division of the Briones Police Department is Eddie Mitchell, who used to be in Posadas.
Wow, what a coincidence.
What a coincidence. And he's kind of good at stretching the jurisdictional.
Right.
And if you think about it, why not? You know, it's stupid for, this is my own soapbox.
Okay.
It's stupid for a police department in one place to say, okay, you can't work with us because your badge doesn't cover this turf. Well, come on. I mean, they all go to the same schools, they go to the same academies, they're all licensed police officers, and the departments that work the best are the sheriff's department, who work effortlessly and seamlessly with the state police, or with the FBI, or the Game and Fish, without these silly, you know, testosterone-fueled turf wars.
Yeah, but that's a staple of crime fiction, is the, you know, the jurisdictional headbutting.
It's a cliche, you know, of the worst kind. I mean, it's a manufactured. You know, if you sat any of those guys down and said, okay, you know, cop, what's wrong with Joe Pickett as a police officer? I'm picking on C.J. Box now. You know, Joe is an experienced, licensed, certified, gun-toting cop. Why not use his expertise? Why thumb your nose at him because he's a critter cop? Well,
the reason, of course, is that conflict helps drive, you know, and so if you create one, that's an excellent way. You know, I don't know how many police procedurals of one sort or another I have read, and very often the guy up at the top is not Bobby Torres or Bill Gassner. He's some asshole, you know, that is there for political reasons or something, or just wants to stay in good with the politicos, since so often this is an elected office. And Donna Leon's series, for example, which is a really different series than the Posadas County, but that's the dynamic that goes on there between Guido Brunetti, the Venetian cop, and the guy that's actually running his department. Is that guy's a politico and just wants to CYA all the time.
Sure. But and how many times have we seen that terrible cliched scene where the cops are fussing with a case and the captain comes in, who's often black, and says, "Oh, you guys got 24 hours to solve this. You don't have your badge." And nobody ever says, "Captain, what are you doing?"
Well, if you watch Bosch on television, I thought it was an interesting evolution of the police chief. Did any of you watch Bosch while it was going on? Well, it's really good television, but interesting drama in the LAPD, which I might add in real life has been riven with interesting drama, so it is not all manufactured. So we have Carlos having his accident, but before too long, we actually have somebody who's found dead in a dumpster.
Yep.
That's probably as far as we should go with the plot, but that gives an Estelle an actual murder in addition to the attack on Carlos to investigate.
That's one of my old themes and plots, is that the poor guy that's in the dumpster, he's a typical slippery slope. Mm-hmm. He didn't need to do what he did, and he got carried away, dumb, made some stupid decisions.
But very often in crime fiction, the only way you can solve the original murder is to have another one, because if the original one's so tricky that it might go forever unsolved, but usually there's something else that happens that allows the investigation to get a grip on it. That's why you so often see sequential murders, not just one, but two or sometimes three. Agatha Christie in particular was good at that. She always... but that's because she had such a perfect murder in the first place that it was not going to get solved unless somebody lost their... What you really learn from all this is if you want to kill somebody, just leave well enough alone. I'm serious, plus you ought to learn some good body disposal techniques. For example, Aaron Elkins, who wrote this marvelous forensic series, remember Gideon Oliver? I don't know if you ever read them. I love those books. And Gideon was a brilliant guy, and not an actual policeman, but frequently called in to solve cases. Anyway, from him I learned the recipe for actually dissolving a body, which involves tide. And I thought about that when that woman in Scottsdale, remember, killed her husband and chopped him up and put him in a dumpster. And I thought she was not a crime fiction reader, because she would have known if she'd been reading that she could have found a better way to dispose of her husband than just putting him in the dumpster where she got caught. So, they're useful things to be acquired by reading crime fiction.
There are.
Right. So you actually, the primary thing I always take away from your books is you absolutely love how things work.
Yeah,
I mean, anything, not just investigating, but you love it. Mechanical stuff, how teaching work, whatever it is. You really, you're a teacher. You were a teacher for forever. So is the constant learning curve something that you just can't shake?
Yes.
Okay. You could expound on that. Come on.
Well, I just discovered something about trains. Because
you've had trains in another book, too.
Yes. Miles Waddell up at Night Zone with his wonderful propane electric train. He's still got rancher problems. Because some people don't like that he's fenced in all of the Night Zone property and trains bringing in tourists and all that stuff. And just purely by accident, a friend of mine up in Santa Fe sent me a picture of a thing he had found out when he was looking at old abandoned trestles. He said, "Do you know what this is?" And he sent me a picture. It was a box about 24 inches square and 24 inches high. And he lifted the cover, and it's full of heavy grease. And the box was attached to the ground. He couldn't move it. And there was what appeared to be part of a universal joint and a drive shaft attached to it, but nothing else. He said, "What is this?" And I said, "I don't know what it is. And it's not connected to the trestle. I have no idea what it is." He sent it to his granddaughter, who is in some place like Italy, and she loves the internet. And she got on the internet with the picture, and in minutes found out what it was. You know, it was a gadget that greases the flanges on locomotive wheels, you know, that hang over the track. Mm-hmm. The wheel has a flange. The flange has to be greased. The tractive force of the wheel doesn't have to be greased, but the flange does. And this thing is a flange greaser.
Well, there you are.
It's full of grease. And when the train goes by, it pumps grease through a hose, which was no longer there, up to a fixture on the track. And the wheels of the train scrub the grease along the flanges along the track. And he said one guy who answered her email said the grease goes about a mile, then you have to have another one. What a great way to try and sabotage Miles Waddell's train.
Oh, there you are.
Because all you got to do is cut the grease hose with an axe, and none of the iron wheel flanges get greased.
Well, that's one reason I like these books so much, is they're so authentic. Now, probably you're never going to need to actually know that, but when you read these books, you know, there's machinery that you learn all about. I mean, really, it's been a fascinating thing. Yeah, right. And actually, there was a chase scene on a train in one of the books.
Yep.
Never mind Miles. It was a different book.
Yeah, and I forgot.
Well, me either, because they're all sort of blended in my head, but I definitely remember the chase scene. And for those who don't know what we're talking about with Night Zone, there's a local rancher who came into a lot of money and decided to create, on top of a mesa, a phenomenal astronomy center. And the one thing, I remember Stephen saying this to me, that Posadas, the one thing it was lacking, you know, you could have air travel, people drove in, but it didn't have a train, and you really wanted it to have a train. So I think you created Night Zone just so you could have a train.
You could have a train.
Yep. Am I right?
As in part, but it's offered lots of fun.
Well, it has, and you know, it's an economic engine for this little community. It brings in tourists and tourist money. It gives jobs to people other than ranching jobs. And you know, you're absolutely right that the sky in New Mexico is so beautiful. It's so clean and spectacular. And on top of a mesa where you would have that clear vision. So, you know, he had plenty of money, and that's what he chose to do. But it did lead, in at least one book, to a territorial conflict.
Yeah.
And people do resent the idea that that stuff can be fenced off, or that something can be created out of nothing they don't get a part of.
Yeah, and they get there's an odd human behavior of, you know, hating the person who does something like that because they didn't give the money to you. I mean, Miles Waddell was just a rancher, and all of a sudden, when his mother died in Chicago, he inherits over $500 million, without talking about selling the super block of business of high-rise buildings. So he's got well over $1 billion to spend. And he's always wanted to do this, so he doesn't give the money to somebody else. He's doing his pet project.
So why was Miles in New Mexico and his mother was worth a fortune in Chicago?
Just he loves cattle and ranching, and
so he came there.
He had no desire to follow in his mother's and father's footsteps, and he was blessed to have a mother who said, "Do what you want to do, Miles. You didn't disown him. You want to be a cowboy? Go be a cowboy." Right.
And so we met him in a couple of books before Night Zone ever really came into being.
Oh yeah, yeah. He was in Double Prey with a real slimy acquaintance.
Yep.
who gets found dead in a cave. But Miles was never a bad guy.
No,
But
I didn't expect him to go in that direction.
Yeah, no, it's just
Which, of course, you had to rain money on him in order for that to happen.
It's been a hobby of his. And the odd irony of it all is that Night Zone is making money.
It is making money.
Which I don't think he ever expected.
So basically, Stephen's created this whole universe, and these people are very real. If you read this series, they're certainly real to me. And they're obviously very real to you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been fun watching him grow up. You know, my favorite example is Tommy Pasquale, who started out as just a punk kid. He's in the first time he's mentioned is when he's 15, running through the stop sign with his bike, and then the first time he's mentioned seriously in the series as a cop, he rolls a police car on this roof right in the middle of an intersection. You know, he jumps over an old bridge, and Gassner watches him do that. Oh. And they start calling him Parnelli Pasquale because he always drives too fast. And then he gradually, he's been getting older and getting more mature. Now he's married to the department photographer with twins.
So as a teacher, you saw kids do this sort of thing, so
Exactly.
It wasn't unusual for you to translate them into your fiction. Right?
Yeah, that's what's interesting about it. One of the most interesting things about teaching is watching what kind of human beings the kids grow into. And
what your role in that is.
Well, as a former principal of mine used to say, so your first job as a teacher is to make these kids better human beings. Forget about content. Make them better people.
That's a very nice philosophy.
Yeah.
I like that. Well, you certainly have accomplished that in your books. Do any of you have questions that you might like to ask Stephen? Yes,
Yeah, I was curious, building on those last comments, if you have a view of human nature, and especially on the nature versus nurture question, maybe that you've learned from your fiction explorations and from your previous career areas, if you have a theory of human nature.
How can I put that into words? I think our biggest mistake has been embracing computers. School districts have wasted awesome amounts of money doing that, which is counterproductive, when they should have been doing vocational, how to fix lawnmowers, tractors, or cars. I think a lot of things have encouraged modern parents to be not parents. The most amazing part about that parent conference, when I was a hearing officer with the hat pin and the jeans, I was a gifted student, an 8th grader, and it was very clear from the beginning that she ran the household. The mother was hopeless. She said, "Oh, can I see that?" And the kid her first response was, "Will I get it back?" I said, "No, you won't get it back." They didn't understand that she was going to be out of school for the rest of the school year and could not go to any other school in the state of New Mexico. That's the law. But, you're just kind of hopeless. And that shows up in the books. There's some interesting cases involving teens. And I think schools have really let them down because they're taking the easy path. Let us give you a computer. And I probably shouldn't say that, but I'm really glad that I'm no longer in the classroom. Because if I had a class of 28 8th graders or seniors or whatever, and they all pulled out these, whatever those gadgets are that you see kids with.
Well, I think if we look at the astounding ignorance displayed all around us every day and the way people fall into disinformation, and whatever, you can see that education has not done well by way too many people. And the other thing you touch upon, I did an event at 4:30 this afternoon, a Zoom event, set in a Appalachian part of Ohio in the 1920s, but it parallels much of today. And the problem is that people, the old jobs were not holding up, but nobody was trained to do anything new, and so there's a real hopelessness about it, you know. That, and I think that we're seeing a lot of that in that people, not everybody has to go to college, but everybody ought to learn how to do something. And you know, we're not seeing that. It's getting harder and harder to find people that can. I mean, years and years ago, it was in the 80s. I lived in England for many months, and I went to all the English heritage sites and so forth that I could. And I remember sitting on the walls, the stone walls in the old Welsh city of Conwy, where there's a wonderful castle. And I was sitting there on the wall looking at the castle, and all there was a guy next to me. I don't know, I was in my 40s. I think he was roughly the same age. And we started talking. It turned out that he's the city mason, and his job was to keep the walls intact and all. But he said the problem was that there was nobody that wanted to be an apprentice. There was nobody who wanted to learn how to maintain the castle walls and the city walls. And he worried about what would happen when he was no longer able to do that. And I think Steve's point about, you know, people don't really want to learn stuff like that too often anymore. But it's so, you know, I don't know what the answer is, but I wouldn't want to be a teacher today.
Did I answer your question?
Sort of. She's nodding her head, so I think we kind of got there. Yeah. Well, that's a good question.
A good short example is, you know, I'm sure there probably is one, but I don't know any secondary school that offers driver's ed with the CDL, commercial driver's license, as the end result for a high school senior. And you see all these trucks going by that says, we want drivers, big billboards out south of Albuquerque. It says, are you a good driver, CDL driver? Call such and such. There aren't enough drivers. And why don't schools train kids?
I don't know if driver's ed is even a part of the curriculum anymore. When I was in high school, it was a class that everybody took. And the high school arranged for the, you know, state people to come. We all took tests in the parking lot, you know, and they gave us our driver's licenses and the whole bit. You know, we had to learn home ec. When I was in junior high school, I worked in the print shop. I was watching Ben Franklin, the thing on PBS right now that Ken Burns is doing. They were talking. I learned how to set, you know, just for fun, how to learn how to set type and do all that kind of stuff. I don't see, I mean, that was not going to be my profession, but still it was an interesting thing to learn. I don't see much of that going on anymore. Instead of having those kinds of labs, they're spending their money on devices. And of course, remote learning has, you know, confused everything for an awful lot of people, and I don't know how that will pan out. Anyway, anybody else have a question they would like to ask?
This may be not on I don't even know what I'm trying to say. Do you have to read your 31 books kind of in succession? You don't. Okay. No. Oftentimes, a lot of authors you do, right?
Well, it depends. Here's the deal. The mystery is complete in every book.
Oh, okay.
So you don't need to read another book in order to read the mystery here and solve it. What you don't get to do if you don't read them in order is read the character development as Steve has written them. So there are going to be spoilers about what happens to people in book 24 that you might have met back in book 3. So, you know, there are two different questions involved, but mysteries are supposed to be complete, each in its own book. Is that fair?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get a spit out, but you did a lot better job than I did. Okay.
Well, I mean, that's a question that comes up a lot. There are a few series where, like Elizabeth Peters' first book in her Amelia Peabody series, If you didn't read the first book, the entire suspense of the first book would be ruined, because a principal suspect in the first book, you would find out what happened if you read any of the other books, and then the first book would have no impact on you because you know. But that's fairly rare. Most of the time, it doesn't work out that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know.
We get some nice suggestions from readers too. There are a couple books in the series that, when a reader says, "What was it? I'd like to read a book that includes Estelle's first day on the job." And so I can remember calling Barbara and saying, "Can I do a prequel?" And she says, "Of course you can, dear. Get with it." Okay.
Right.
And then there's another one that, Bobby Torres's first day or first year on the job. And then they sort of, go back like that, but you can read them in order by how stuff happens. But, I listen to readers when they write me letters and say, "How about?" In fact, a funny, brief story. When I got to the end of Bag Limit, and Bill Gassner was going to retire, I decided, okay, Estelle's going to take over the series with Scavengers. And I got this letter from, it turns out, a fairly elderly lady, very crooked handwriting. It says, "I enjoyed your books. I enjoy Estelle. This is what you need to do. 1," and she listed. 2, she told me, this is what, and about 9 different things. And she hit every one of them.
Wow.
She had been reading the series that close.
You're lucky you heard from her. I mean, that's really, that's a nice thing when a reader cares enough,
Yeah, they don't always do that,
No, and sometimes they're just complaining. That's a whole different thing, right?
I had one come up to me with a scrap of paper about twice the size of a postage stamp after a signing and a talk in Eager. And she handed it to me, and it was a list of words. Damn, hell.
Oh, she didn't like the words
bastard.
that you'd included?
She said, "You shouldn't use these words." I said, "Well, Bill Gassner is an expert." "No, you shouldn't use these in your books."
Well, readers bring their own prejudices to work, there's no question about it. But after all, it's your book, and you get to write it the way you want to, which is hard for readers to accept.
Yep.
So, any other questions, or should we? Oh, there we are.
It's certainly better than the woman who walked up to you with the book with 15 little sticky notes where she marked every occurrence of those words you shouldn't use.
Yep.
There's an actual word for that called boulderizing, which is based on Thomas Boulder, who was an English clergyman in the Victorian era, and he wanted to expurgate all of the language.
The nastiness.
Yeah.
The nasty.
But once you set up censorship, it's like the whole thing going on with banned books at the moment. And I find it really interesting that some of the books that have been banned have shot to the top of the bestseller list. So by banning them, they've inadvertently created an audience for them, which I think is a really good thing.
Yep.
Anyway, thank you, Stephen, very much.
You're welcome.
We're gonna ask Steve if he'd like to sign your books for you. Thank you all for joining us this evening.